run locally, and people could write dApps in JavaScript HTML or JavaScript in QML in that case, which is a Qt markup language, I think it's called. Qt modeling language, sorry. And yeah, there was talk of like decentralized Uber. We'd had all these decentralized applications that people would be running locally. But yeah, and then it was in their yellow paper as well. So defined app and a browser. But then the focus sort of went into the protocol, namely around scaling. So around 2017, 2018, we had the ICO boom, we had CryptoKitties, basically things that would grind the network to a halt thanks to the absence of scaling and the gas limits. And this has been worked on a lot. There was research at the time around plasma chains and sharding research and development. But then I sort of say that L2 sort of front run that, and L2s was successfully scaling, although they had sort of more centralized sequences. They were still delivering scale at the cost of centralization, but that's fine. But then more recently in 2026, Vitalik put out some tweets around this saying that L2 should identify a value add other than scaling. And yeah, it's more convinced about rollup precompile and I guess some of the stuff Kev's covered as well, proving versus at re-execution. This was the straw map, they called it, the strawman roadmap. So Justin Drake tweeted this, I think, but it's a contribution of a lot of people from EF. Maybe there's mention of the quantum stuff from Michael's talk down here.
Yeah.
So yeah, you've got the execution layer, data layer, and consensus layer. And yeah, with those goals, I think that's already been mentioned around making it more accessible to more machines so that you can have more nodes running Ethereum rather than just a few powerful ones. But then there's some disclaimers there that this is, so it's a work in progress. It's Ethereum Foundation takes, and some of them are uncertain about shipping. So it's a bit of a moving target, which is fine if these things evolve. But hopefully, yeah, for users, hopefully most of that movement's under the hood. It's a very stark transition into what was recently mentioned of the Ethereum mandate. So I sort of look at Ethereum Foundation staying deep into the research, and they're delivering it mostly on the protocol, not so much the holistic dApp browser view anymore. They've just been needing to deliver on this front. But then their mandate sort of zooms out again, it seems. Yeah, and it's sort of a call for a broader movement. I'll just pull them both up on the screen there. The first aim is to ensure Ethereum becomes and stays a decentralized and resilient tool for self-sovereignty. And yeah, it's all in the mandate, it's a PDF there. And the second is around scaling guaranteed availability of self-sovereignty to users ready to exercise it directly. So it seems similar to the original 2014 vision, but I guess in absence of detail, it's just to say, look, this is the mandate, this is still what we want to achieve. But right now we're seeing obviously a lot of focus on making sure the rails, that is the execution client, consensus client are solid. This is from the author of Read, Write, Own. He's, I guess, just making the point that it's there's still more than just finance around the corner. Like some people are saying that the non-financial use cases of crypto are dead. I've never thought that to be the case. I've always been aspirational, saying, when can we use this? Like, when will the baker around the corner or the coffee shop around the corner actually get immediate value from this? There are, ways that certain communities can get value from a Ethereum blockchain, but it's just about making it more and more accessible, and we're getting more dApps doing that are not just maybe NFTs and CryptoKitties. But yeah, I still believe there's non-financial use cases to be had. Off the back of the mandate, Danny Ryan, who left the EF to form Etherealize, is sort of focusing on institutions. So he sort of said to Ethereum Foundation, you go deep, we'll go broad, which makes sense. Like Ethereum Foundation is going deep into research. Etherealize is going broad into institutions to deliver products to users via those institutions. But then I'm thinking, isn't there still space for lots of small communities to deliver things? It's often harder when there's a high entry barrier, when you have to sort of incorporate different things, but I'm still, that's always been my lean. So I guess to jump back into a bit of my intro, what have I been doing outside of work? Early days, I tried a couple of random startups, but it was to deliver tech education to schools, but then that was a bit hard. So then I tried to make a makers collaboration platform so that people could form in their local communities and teach each other whilst building things for other people. So it was the idea of just trying to connect people locally via some platform. I've run different groups, IoT meetup groups, Ethereum groups in Sydney. And then in London, I've run, this was a photo from the 100th weekly Web3 workshop. Yeah, thank you. So, yeah, and after doing 100 of those, I kind of pivoted to roundtable reflections. But it was off the back of doing a lot of those workshops that that Jamie from Ethereum London said, hey, you've been doing those workshops for a while, do you want to run Ethereum London? So that's why I'm doing that. I've also gone back into repair cafes. I found one near me, so I can go to do those. Just fixing random things, because I've got a bit of a hardware background as well. But you get the gist of who I am outside of work, and this is what I've always been looking for. So when I look back at Ethereum, that's what drew me in. I thought this is going to be something that can, people don't have to code so much and don't have to worry so much about this. If the dApp browser is handling it, they can just write an app that is independent, doesn't have as many dependencies, and around centralization, of course. So yeah, and as each of those components evolve, it will be very hard for a dApp to integrate them. Like, it is possible. Fileverse does this. They use things to interact with the blockchain, and they have decentralized storage. But it is, they're a very smart team, and they're doing a lot of work to deliver that product. And that's the product that Vitalik uses, that he mentions it uses. So I had, looking at some of the other Ethereum tools that exist. There's, or I guess people in the community. There's the Status Network, which is, we'll touch more on that later with Linear. There's Status Messenger, something Vitalik uses as well. There's some of the technologies like Waku, which is the messenger side of things, is used inside Status, Railgun, and Fileverse. The people who've worked on all of this, and there's, can't remember, there's other decentralized things. Decentralized storage is one of those, codecs, I think that's called. But they've also worked on Nimbus, which is an Ethereum light client. So there's a team that's doing all of that. And basically the people behind that who've been around since, basically OGs of 2018 or 17 or 18, they're wanting to combine these things to realize the original Ethereum vision. So yeah, that's Logos, which is where I started working. They have this idea of I think they're calling it a base camp now, but there's a Logos core, and the core lets individuals bring little modules in. But the idea is you have storage, messaging, and a blockchain wrapped inside. And under the hood, you have mixnet. So you get privacy from the network level, which is something that, again, if you want to do that in Ethereum, I think you've got to sort of take care yourself to get that level of privacy from the network layer. And then the dApps, can interact with your module. So it's very much like a Linux thing, which I think my next slide says anyway. I'm just going to skip this slide for time. I've gone way over, sorry. Okay, cool. So yeah, this is a link to the Logos stack if anyone's interested in that tech. But I like the sort of summary that the author put there. Corey Perry, sorry. If you understand how Linux works, you understand Logos. So it's a modular architecture. And yeah, that's Logos. And if you want to take action, there's several ways as well. So I like what they do, which I guess we'll touch on later as well, around the circles and the community outreach they do. So this is something that really drew me. They're not just a Web3 company sort of designing just the tech. They're really on the ground as well, trying to connect with the community. So for me, that resonated a lot. And they're still very Ethereum aligned, of course, with what they're doing in delivering the Ethereum vision. So yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And now for the fireside chats, if I could call everybody up on stage and we will get going.
Everyone's gone.
Oh, is us? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we see.
You're up. You're all up.
We'll have an order of the next slide.
Thanks.
So you can.
Should we go?
And I'm gonna pass these guys.
Sure.
There you go.
Yeah. Yep. So you've met the first three, the speakers, and we'll. Or did you sing?
I'm the chair malfunction.
Okay. Hopefully it doesn't sing. There we go. Oh, Roxana, we lost it. Yeah, maybe we'd get a brief. Oh, do you not have mics? Brief introduction. Brief introduction. Tell us more about you, not brief. Tell us a bit about you, what you're working on, but both of you at the end. Declan and Roxana.
Yeah, testing. Hi everyone. So I'm Declan Fox. I work at Consensus. Where I'm VP of product and I oversee the Linear team. So James kind of introduced it earlier, but for those that aren't familiar with Linear, what is it? Some might say it's a layer 2, it's a chain. It is all these things, but I kind of boil it down to, it really is just a ledger. It's another blockchain, or allows you to spin up another blockchain, but also with the benefit of zero-knowledge proofs that Kev touched on, you actually can have this sort of trust minimized interoperability between that chain and say Ethereum or even like another chain. Okay, so that's kind of like an evolution of like where blockchains have been and where they're going. Like, why is all that interesting? It's just a load of technical mumbo jumbo. If you actually think about, what people are using blockchains for today, and for example, like an enterprise or institutional setting, 80% of transactions are leveraging Bezu, right? They have these private permission Bezu chains, which are kind of like siloed, like in a sort of organization, and they're not talking to Ethereum, they're not talking to anyone else. So what you can do with Linear is you can essentially take that, give it an upgrade, and all of a sudden, all these chains that are sitting in, BNY Mellon and Citibank, JP Morgan, they can now talk to Ethereum, or they can talk to Linear Mainnet, or they can talk to Status Network, or they can talk to Base. So that's kind of the key thing around the technology. And then we do have Linear Mainnet as well, which is essentially just our own sort of instantiation of the tech, just to kind of prove that it all works and it's battle tested and dog fooded and stuff. So in a nutshell, that is Linear. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hi everyone, my name is Roxana. Well, I guess there's a bio on the Luma page, but I could just share a few cool things about me. I've been a chess player for 33 years now. Keeps your mind active. I built an IQ test and I wasted 5 years of my life just to understand that the world is not getting more intelligent, mathematically speaking. But now we have AI, which is fixing everything. Part of my daily work for the past year, I've been with Logos. So I think James did a very good presentation over all of Logos. I run the Logos Circle here in London, which is part of the movement. It's very important for us to understand locally what are the issues of the communities and what are the issues of the people living in this city. And there's about 25 other cities where we go and do this kind of grassroots approach, bottom up. And it opens up for us a new opportunity to actually build tools that people need and could use and are not necessarily Web3 native. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so we'll I guess kick off with who sort of remembers that original Ethereum vision, like the DApp browser or Mist browser. I actually didn't say it specifically, but there was the Mist browser that was deprecated in 2019. Who sort of remembers that? Or did anyone try sync Ethereum early on their local laptop? Okay.
Not that early.
Right. Yeah, that was something that I sort of struggled on. But in terms of applications, I'm not sure who wants to begin, but what are some applications that people might have considered or seen or heard of outside of, I guess, pure, or just outside of currencies, say, and maybe outside of tokens then? What are some of the other applications that sort of, be they semi-financial or non-financial, that make use of blockchain?
Ethereum wallet, Ether wallet.
Mhm.
That was quite used in 2017, if I remember correctly. Doing the ICOs, and it was quite shit. No offense. Etherscan, which was again quite used, and the team was desperate to hire in Malaysia. They were desperate. They're desperate to get people on board. Those are the two that I remember using extensively at the time.
Yep. So there's significant tools like that I guess builders would use, as well as consumers using to check their transactions. In terms of the I guess the end user facing applications, in terms of what did Ethereum promise to solve for them, or if not promise, what things did people talk about? Like I do remember decentralized Uber being mentioned a long time ago. I think Provenance was another application that was kind of born out of London. I did reach out to them, and they apparently kind of pivoted, not so much away from blockchain, but less blockchainy. But they're still doing sort of semi-provenance things. Yeah, anything outside?
That's Bancor, right? Bancor, which was trying to solve the currencies problem in some of the African villages, and they inspired Uniswap, some of their centralized exchange options. But then there was ETHLDN, that was the DEX on Ethereum that was really hard to use.
Yeah, so I think Bancor was bonding curves, but yeah.
Yeah, I think on the application side, I'm actually, I think you brought it up earlier, like, was it Chris Dixon, right, from A16Z was saying, oh, people are dooming around, there's only, only financial use cases for crypto. And I think he's half wrong, half right. I actually So my view is that blockchains as a technology are like pretty cumbersome. Like when you compare them to what things you have in Web2, like actually there's a lot of overhead there. Even if you're using things like ZK proofs, it's just quite a cumbersome technology. So what is it good for? It's good for this sort of like objective inputs and outputs. And there's only kind of two use cases that I've seen which make sense for that sort of technology. And one is money, and we're kind of seeing that, you know, very widely, right? Payments. You're seeing a lot around tokenization, right? It's very clear. It's almost like a mathematical problem. What goes in as a calculation, it's very clear what comes out. So it's great for sort of finance there. I think the other one is identity. It's probably there's an element of sort of objective identity, and I think the big use case there is ENS, so Ethereum name service, where you have this sort of relatively objective sense of like this pseudonymous address is tied to an ENS name. And I think that's probably the other sort of non-financial product market fit use case that I've seen on the application side, at least.
Right. I think I remember. So, like obviously, a lot of people know about the DAO and the DAO hack.
Yeah.
But if I remember correctly, those guys were also building something called Lockit or like some Slockit. Yes. So it's essentially like locks that are tied to smart contract. And I remember like at that time, so the narrative was pretty strong that the smart contracts are, you know, this new instrument that can replace legal contracts. And yeah, that was like quite like serious at that time. And I think now there is sort of like reincarnation with all the like agent economy, like in view that, you know, like agents would you know, like do, you know, like massive like loss of like payments, and the legal system cannot possibly withhold, you know, such like a large amount of disputes. So we need some sort of like a layer before. So like obviously like legal system would be a fallback, but even before that, we need some layer that would handle, you know, all these agent to agent disputes. So yeah.
That's a really good point. Yeah, I forgot about Slockit. That was like I guess like a line bike or any other sort of bike hire system, but without a centralized application. It would be the lock itself would be a smart lock that's connected to a smart contract, and once you pay that address, it would unlock for a period of time. Like I think it was good in terms of the ideals, and as a starting point, it would have been good. But obviously, there's a grey area in terms of I guess where, you know, what if the bike's faulty and all that? Like you could report faults, but then the bike could fix itself. Perhaps like you could, you know, with its funds, you could book a repair person to come and fix it if it's not getting hired. So, you know, there was some interesting concepts that could be touched on there, which also reminds me of the, I don't know if it's called Flowerbot or Florabot or something like that. Does anyone remember a flower project, some art that would generate itself? This was like a really early project.
No, it inspired kind of like a regenerative DAO back in 2018 that would essentially plant its own trees from the revenues generated from cutting trees in the forest.
Oh, that's an interesting one. Yeah. For this artwork, it was, I think it would accept donations with a QR code on it. And then once it had an amount of funds, it could commission the next artist to build the next evolution of that flower. And then, like, I think it had a couple of, you know, iterations that I'm not sure what happened. I don't see it around anymore. But
there was colored coins, which were essentially it kind of inspired NFTs and fractional ownership on chain.
Yeah, there's definitely some things there as well. Yeah, tokenization of assets, which has been a big one.
I've used blockchain in 2017 for health tech. So timestamping who was accessing patient data from pharma, insurance, and hospital chains, but without putting electronic health records on chain because it was retarded at the time. Still is.
Yeah, I guess this is where the zero knowledge proof side of things come in. It's maybe, Kev, did you want to expand on, say, what are some of the attributes of the zero knowledge proofs beyond succinctness, or like when they can be used in for privacy or succinctness, or like what are some of the attributes benefits people could get from using zero knowledge proofs?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess there's only really two attributes. There's succinctness and there's privacy. Succinctness is what we're using it for at the firm, just because all of the data that goes in is just public data. It's really just the block plus this other auxiliary input that's needed to prove the block is correct. The privacy use case was something that I worked on while I was at Aztec, which is basically a privacy L2. yeah, I'm not really sure what to say. There's a lot of use cases for for privacy and client-side proving. Yeah.
Did you want to add anything about zk uses privacy other?
Sure. I mean, if we go kind of outside the, compressing a lot of transactions, like financial transactions, I think the other kind of direction that is now mostly in the research phase is verifiable inference, like so-called like zkML. But it's like we are like really, really far from something that'll be like close to the size of the models, like the frontier models. So it's going to be like several of orders of magnitude improvement in terms of the like proven overhead, so that as it becomes viable. And also, I think it's more and more. I see things about consent provenance. So it's about combating fakes and like just in general. So AI generated images and videos. It's not clear yet from the business perspective. So there's like no sustainable business model, I think. But like several companies are like working towards this direction, like using zkML like together with the standards like C2PA in order to build kind of proven pipelines of image transformation, video transformation, like and so on. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think I remember there was a zk mic project that was done at a hackathon to basically have an original recording, and you could prove that was in a recording. But if some edits were done, like cropping it or just increasing the volume, certain transformations were verifiable. So you would say you haven't tampered with the audio, but you did do some adjustment for quality purposes. Maybe to jump to a couple of topics. I mean, I'm just going to throw out there AI. Like, who sort of had to consider AI in some form with what they're doing now?
I didn't have to consider it now. Back in 2017, I used to go to these Asian conferences to talk about blockchain and AI in health tech, but we used to talk about machine learning versus deep learning. There was no term as in AI. And at the time, I remember all of the unicorns that I would highlight in the US that were building AI are completely gone now. None of them exist anymore. And the funny thing was, you had this projection of where AI would make sense. So medical tech, health tech at the time, it was very much on like a 20% of popularity, and tourism was skyrocketing, right, because of the algorithms. And I think now it's very interesting because we have a lot of use cases for AI, but at the same time, we have a lot of very stupid cases for AI because not a lot of people use it to its true potential. Which is why for me it's interesting what's happening now in the UK, for example, with this sovereign AI fund that was launched, what ARIA is doing, what the research community is putting out there. Just talking to PhDs, talking to people that say, look, I don't want to be a founder, I don't want to be a startup founder or an entrepreneur, but I want to be a researcher. I want to, bring the breakthroughs in AI and machine learning that were never really brought to the table. So that for me is the interesting part.
Interesting. Any other hot takes?
I think if what's happening at the infrastructure layer, sort of above the core protocol with AI, is all of this sort of like agent to agent interaction, and I think that's sort of come at the same time as we're seeing the proliferation and sort of widespread adoption of stablecoins, right? The regulation, specifically in the US, has got a lot leaner on stablecoins. Everyone's sort of coming into that space now, from the banks to sort of private, corporations, and they're able to sort of use agents as a way to almost bypass, or like even enable merchants who aren't able to sort of get banked, right? So you can essentially offer a service, your AI agent, which might then want to procure with that service, but that merchant doesn't have a sort of like a Stripe account or something. An AI using stable coins can actually just go and do that interaction for you. So it's almost sort of front running, like the speed of the technology is moving is so fast, the merchants can't keep up. They'll probably catch up eventually, but at least for now, what we're seeing with AI is actually it's finding product market fit in crypto through payments in particular, and it's sort of bypassing all like the APIs and the sort of traditional paywalls that you might find in these kind of SaaS products.
There's a Reddit post that talks about my current leaving Bitcoin, I think 2014 or something. And I'm not going to mention the name of the coin because it is irrelevant, but I'm going to mention the protocol Interledger. So there was a talk about this Interledger protocol, which you all guys know what is going for, and using that with AI and having this kind of automated workflow. And that was more than 10 years ago, right? So it's very interesting to see that it didn't find the market fit, product market fit with Interledger protocols and found it with stable coins. But it's really interesting to see it actually happening today.
And yeah, maybe another last topic before we switch to Q&A, so people think up your questions and we'll get the mic going around. What did people think of the Ethereum mandate, or maybe even the cover art? Or just generally, yeah. Any hot takes?
Ken's got to start on this one, sure.
Maybe from within the Ethereum mandate. Floor is yours.
Let me think about
Okay. Yeah, I thought the cover art was surprising. If they're doing the principle of subtraction, I get it. They're just saying, look, we're still silly. We're doing deep research and silly things at a high level. I'm like, okay, that's the duality of the Ethereum Foundation, maybe. So that, yeah, interesting take.
I can highlight, like, from the kind of outsider standpoint is there's like one opinion that, you know, Ethereum changes roadmap like every second month. But I mean, on the other side, this is how you build stuff in the presence of uncertainty, like, and this priority changes. We test some ideas and they turn out to be bad, and some turn out to be like good, right? Like, for instance, when you're saying like the original vision of Ethereum, for instance, for me, this is sharding. And like sharding was kind of like put away in favor of rollups. Now, like, rollups are sort of like unofficially,
Yeah. Find something other than scaling to do.
Yeah, well, I would say like beyond that. But yeah, I mean, this is like natural. So this is the evolution, and it's good to see that Ethereum is it's changing to the best. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think like I spent a lot of my time trying to, onboard more people to this like on-chain economy that we're all building. And when you think about like when you're in those conversations, in those meetings, and you're sort of educating people, right? Like, okay, first you need to put your business on an L2. I forget the fact that it's an L2, but that's going to be faster, cheaper. It gives you more customization. It gives you privacy, etc. Okay, that's cool. Like, yeah, and it has this sort of security by Ethereum. Okay, so now they're understanding Ethereum. What's Ethereum's roadmap? What's Ethereum's doing? And we got to a point, I felt recently, where it was a really clear message, a very sort of like certain roadmap. And I still think that's there, but it definitely feels like customers are now like raising concerns or questions around like, okay, is it just going to change? Do I now have this thing called platform risk or whatever like involved in my sort of procurement process? And I do think that holds Ethereum back, because you're in the room and there's Canton and there's Solana, and they're seriously considering between the three. And I just think that in particular for perhaps, and this is maybe a little bit sort of tailored towards institutions and enterprise, which again is like quite a big part of the market right now. When you look at the addressable market for on-chain transactions, that is where a lot of the market is going to be. I do think it's a net negative a little bit. And I get that. I appreciate there's like some clarity from within the organization, but again, someone not inside the EFs, maybe I can say some things. It feels a little bit torn sometimes, and that definitely holds things back.
Makes sense. Kev?
Yeah, I guess I should probably watch what I say.
That is your take.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Ethereum's changed too much in terms of this crops mandate that's come out. It's just that we've sort of just explicitly said that this is what we're aiming for. I think crops has always been there, and maybe last year or in the past, there was some sort of mixed messaging where it seemed like we was like going all in on institutions and stuff like this. So yeah, I think overall I do like the mandate, and Ethereum being very explicit that crops is sort of the highest priority.
Great. Let's maybe a quick round of applause for the panelists here. And then we've got
I have a question real quick. I want to ask about the fork. So can you guys say the when it's expected, the date, and also what was the main impetus for the fork?
Is this Amsterdam or?
The next one.
Yeah, whatever the next one.
Yeah, so the next fork that we're working on right now is Amsterdam, and the one after that is Hecata. I don't believe we have a particular date for it. As usual, when you're still developing it.
Soon.
The main reason for this fork, or the main initiative on this fork, is scaling. So a lot of gas repricing is happening in this fork, something called EPBS, which essentially, as I said before, you have 12 seconds in the slot. Currently in Ethereum right now, a lot of the 12 seconds is actually being wasted. So we have this new EIP that essentially allows you to utilize the slot a lot better. So yeah, these are the two main ones that are going in, plus block level access lists, which essentially allows you to parallelize this block validation part that I spoke about before. So yeah.
Yeah, that's proposer build separation for PBs.
Okay, great.
Yeah, some questions.
Questions from the audience? Yes, coming all the way to the back.
Hi, good evening.
Very good.
My name is Lillian, or Lily. This is my first time at Crypto Mondays.
Welcome.
Thank you. I know, thanks. So I'm not entirely.
We got
new to
one.
the space.
Got one. Come on, guys. See how hard it is to convert people to whatever we need. Never done it. Welcome.
Oh gosh. Thank you. Thanks for that. So I'm not entirely new to this space, but I am new to this space here in the UK. I was a big part of the crypto blockchain space in Africa. So in Kenya particularly, and I'm sure everyone on stage, like I've had a couple of conversations and everyone's mentioned how big it is, and the adoption and everything, and application of blockchain generally across Africa. So I know we're here, but if you'll allow like a 2-minute Africa takeover, I'd love to hear if you guys have any thoughts about what's next, the builds that are happening, and like what the vision and where Africa sort of more generally, or different regions in Africa, how they fit into the visions.
Yeah, I know. I remember the name now. There's a particular group. I think he runs either hackathons or educational groups, and we've touched base a couple of times and trying to do some, I guess, cross-border communications or presentations. I forget what it's called. I think it's just Web3 Africa. Actually, I think that's the title of it. But another project I know, which was mentioned before around Will Ruddock, like using Bancor, in grassroots economics, and that's I think it's in Mombasa, which is he sort of started it there to have a community currency, and so all of the technologies that go towards, say, bonding curves or making it easier for what is it, USSD, like text interactions to get to a blockchain connection, or using your phone's messaging service to interact with the blockchain. Those kinds of things are helping his particular project, and I think that sort of scales to other areas as well. So wherever, like he's been around for a long time, and I follow a lot of his work, and how he hops around. He's tried Ethereum for a bit, and then he's hopped away from it. I think he's kind of interested, but it comes down to the sort of sovereignty of the servers, which is another attribute. So that's why I like listening to him and his use case, and because he's literally been living there for a long time, and he sort of talks about his needs and what he wants for the community around him, and those attributes I find quite interesting to then see how we're serving them. Things like the zk. Basically everything that Kev talked about around verifying rather than executing, that allows the servers that are run and to host the blockchain be smaller. They don't have to be powerful servers as much. So, but there's several things that come from that.
Awesome. That's a very interesting. It's a very interesting project in Ghana. It's called Wireless Ghana. And essentially it was an opportunity by this community of tech people to connect different computers and form like an intranet, because they had no access to the internet, and it was used in universities, and now it became a huge thing. So if you look up Wireless Ghana, you'll see exactly how it evolved. It evolved in something so much bigger now. It's across the country, but it started on the idea that people wanted to have access of sharing information and knowledge, and using that to support the educational side. And I think that point on the educational side is the biggest component there, because you have a lot of you have a lot of organizations, even led by women, where they teach for free, they give you a computer for free, give you a Raspberry Pi for free, so you can learn how to code. And also there's I looked at Nigeria versus Ghana, which is 2018, where I did a report on the ground with a few people locally, and Nigeria was very interesting because the rate of having access to electricity, having access to internet, and kind of connecting all these remote areas was advancing so fast compared to any of the other countries in the region. And then the most interesting part for us was the fact that it had a very young population. That was it had the youngest population, and they were very much interested in embracing tech literacy and building things, which is something that coming from Europe, where everyone is very relaxed and can't be bothered, and they have choices. I think that was very interesting to see from the community.
So it could be like another leapfrogging in technology, like when sort of mobile phones help certain communities to leapfrog copper. This might be something else where we can sort of leapfrog certain banking infrastructure. Yeah, did we have another? I think there's another question floating around in the middle.
There was someone here. Did you have a question?
Yeah.
Hi guys, my name is Nicholas. I work for Monad. I have a question regarding zkVM and the feasibility of the implementation. How live do we need the probability to be in order for it to be implementable in production? Like, is it good enough that 100% of the past blocks are like within 9 seconds if the block time was to remain at 12 seconds? Do we need it to be like provably below that at all times with all workloads that we know of right now, or anything like that?
Yes, I'll just repeat your question. It's basically on the liveness of proving. Do we need like P100? Do we need 100% of the blocks to be provable within, let's say, 6 to 9 seconds? Absolutely. We need like 100% of the blocks. All of the if you pack a precompile with, let's say, ModX or with BLS12, we need to be able to prove this within a certain amount of time. So it's not just the average block where you just like surf mainnet and then see like what is the average block and I prove it within 6 seconds. So yeah, I've been looking into this. I think it was yesterday and on the way here. Just because a lot of provers are saying, okay, we have P99, we have P100. So I looked at sort of what do mainnet blocks actually look like, and some precompiles are just never used. Like there's this Blake 2F precompile that within the last year, I believe it got used about 100 times. The BLS12 precompile, it got used once within 1 year. So P100 and P99 don't really mean much here. Which is why we have this sort of benchmarking infrastructure where we fill a block up with a particular precompile, try to prove it, and see exactly how long does that take. So yeah, it's a pretty interesting question. Yeah.
Yeah, it's also why I think it's important for like Ethereum developers as well and the EVM to evolve over time, just to maybe like remove some of these precompiles or like reprice these opcodes such that it's not just the prover teams who are obviously working to generate faster, cheaper proofs, but also the core operations as well can definitely be a lot leaner, and it just it works in both directions.
Yeah, that's actually my new EIP. To basically EVMify some of the precompiles, like the ones that I said that aren't being used. We can just change them into like EVM bytecode. So a precompile is basically, you can think of it as whenever somebody calls this special function, it goes right into, it has direct access to some efficient library. If you EVMify it, it basically means that instead of going to the efficient library, you now just call EVM bytecode, which means that you implicitly reprice it based on the EVM bytecode. So I'm looking to see like what precompiles aren't being used, and then seeing if we can like EVMify them. ModX is basically the worst offender in Ethereum. Yeah, I'm trying to get rid of it. But it's pretty hard.
Another question.
Yeah, hi. I'm going to put my hand up to start off with and say I'm an apps guy. So maybe Declan was talking about that a bit to do with corporates. I understand the infrastructure. I see kind of quite close to the Solana network. See Ethereum very, very good on things like security, and that Michael talking about very much about how do you kind of future-proof things. And if I look at Bitcoin, that's fantastic for payments because it's very well recognised. I mean, the public understand Bitcoin. We don't necessarily understand the other chains, but that seems to be a very simplistic view of the blockchain world, and I'd love to hear what the panel think of that as a somewhat simplistic view. I'm not as deep into the various blockchains as any of you, so I'd love to hear.
Yeah, maybe I go. I think ultimately the way these things will pan out is that the actual blockchain layer itself will be very much abstracted away. The same way that when you open your phone and you go onto like Facebook or whatever, you don't know if it's using AWS or GCP or Azure. Like the background infrastructure is very much just what is good enough for the job. And I think application developers or distributors, people that own the customer relationship, they're very much looking at it kind of like you were saying, where like what is fast, what is cheap, what is secure, what do I want to have trust that the platform is not gonna change, like what has open governance. So it becomes a much more like objective decision, and I think the end user's decision around am I using a Solana or a Bitcoin or Ethereum will become very much like abstracted away. And even the assets, right? You mentioned like let's say like BTC as an asset class. I mean, Michael was kind of saying like, on Starknet, you can kind of move these like assets now to other chains. So even the idea of like assets having a moat around an asset is like going to be completely gone. So yeah, I think
that's a good point. At some of the workshops I used to run, and maybe Peter, you're at some of them, I'd sort of try to look at the product side of things to say like, what are the attributes to the end user who's not tech savvy at all, like let alone crypto savvy? What is the attribute for them that is of value in this product? And how do you sort of talk to startups and say, here's the value proposition of building on this technology? And it's a tough one because one of the value propositions is you could, if your competitor built there, you could access their users. But in a sense, if you're the first mover, that's sort of to your disadvantage. Interoperability, if you say that, it might not mean so much, but if you say, oh, when your customers are doing something on the blockchain, you could see those accounts and you could offer rewards to those accounts because it's all on a public ledger. But that sort of cuts both ways. So it's a bit of a hard sell. You could say that you are not dependent on particular infrastructure. So if you were running a truly decentralized application that ran locally, then you could say, well, anyone can run this at any time with an internet connection, not needing a server. So there's some, I guess, liveness guarantees in terms of being able to run the application. But it was just I just found it a bit of a hard sell sometimes to break down the attribute for an end user or even a business beyond, I guess the finance mode.
Okay, so a simple problem with a simple solution. If you're doing an acquisition for your company, you're selling your company to someone else, if you go through the banking system, it takes a long time. If you're using Bitcoin, in 10 minutes, the settlement is done, which is great, right? It will take you another 3 to 5 business days to get into your bank account with the OTC provider and everything, but just the actual sale in 10 minutes is done. If you're looking in terms of erosion of freedoms and decline of freedoms, is where we're going with civil society, then that's a very complex problem, and it's going to take a long time, and it's not just the technology to solve it, right? It's going to need a group of activists and people who push and pressure. So that's more complex. So some problems are very easy to solve using the technology, taking advantage of the throughput that you're offering, taking advantage of the block size and everything. Some other problems that are more deeply rooted in the social layer, that they don't have easy solutions. And it doesn't matter if you're using Solana or Ethereum or Logos or Bitcoin. The idea is that it's going to take a long time, and it's essentially a bet. It's an experiment to try to reclaim freedoms that we had maybe 20 years ago that we don't have anymore.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, maybe so. Like I'll just add. So if we speak about the kind of differences between different chains, right? So like multiple dimensions. So one dimension is kind of specialization of the chain, right? So even though you can do kind of like the same stuff on both like Solana, like Ethereum, there's like still some sort of like focus. And like roughly, so your view is pretty good, I think, right? So Bitcoin will always be special, right? Even though like people will be like trying to do like and will do payments on that like through like Lightning, through ARC, through RGB, like other scaling solutions, right? It's still like hard money and the something else. If we're talking about the like payments, right? So we will, of course, will have kind of hidden like infrastructure layers, as Declan said, like Circle has it, Stripe has it, like other like providers will have it. We will have like if it's a chain plus app, right? So it will like the brand will also like will not disappear. Like if we talk about Africa, for instance, like Silo is like it's pretty big in Africa, right? It's used for payments like a lot. Base same, right? And we have kind of Base super app, which is the kind of your entry point to the ecosystem. So yeah, I guess there are like many different dimensions where like from which views you can address this question.
Do we have time for?
I think we have time for like one more question. Should I come over this side?
Hi, my name is Niels Abdeltif. I'm building credit for AI agents, but right now I just have a question on, I think, censorship resistance. A while ago, I came across something called FOCIL, FOCIL, and I'd like to basically hear more about, what the status is there, maybe for the benefit of the audience, brief overview. Yeah, super interesting question. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Hello? Yeah, sure. So Fossil has just been SFI'd for the H-star fork, so Hecate. So not the one that's currently happening now, but the one after it. Just to give a bit of a context on like what this is and what this means for censorship resistance. At every 12 seconds, a person is chosen to propose a block. And what usually happens is that this person delegates the responsibility to a block builder. So this is just some very big entity that's able to extract value from the block. The issue of this is that currently on Ethereum, there's about 2 of them. And if they go down, then that's a liveness issue. But the other issue as well is if they say that your transaction is not getting into a block, it's not getting into a block, unless you have this thing called local building. So this is the proposers that say, I'm going to build my block locally and actually lose money. So Fossil is this new technique that basically says you have a proposer at the beginning of the 12 seconds, but you also have 16 other people who now are able to force the proposer to include certain transactions into a block. So every 12 seconds, you have a proposer, the builder who they might delegate to, and now this sort of committee of 16 people who now force transactions in, which means that if the builder says, I don't want to include your transaction, they have to include whatever's on the fossil list or the union of the fossil list. Technically, the caveat there is that if the block is actually full, they don't need to include anything. And the idea there is that if a builder wants to sort of keep censoring you, they have to keep paying and keep filling up the block. So roughly speaking, that's what fossil is, and it's coming in H-star.
Cool. Can I just follow up on that? Because I think the question was, it was related to sort of adding, Tornado Cash transactions and the liability of, these block builders in, for example, the US, if they were targeted, right? I just thought it was a really interesting kind of tension, right? Because if you're trying to build something that's permissionless, censorship resistant, but then you have a government that's able to crack down on these entities, it's a bit of a
Right. Yes, I'll just repeat it just because he doesn't have a mic. Essentially, there's this tension between the block builders who now could be held liable for including transactions that, let's just say, the government doesn't want them to include. So you have these big block builders, maybe one of them is situated in the USA, and the USA says, okay, no more Tornado Cash transactions. Like, what do you do as a builder when you have these 16 independent people, maybe one of you are part of the 16 and you're forcing the builder to include this transaction? It's a good question. I don't really know what the legal consequences there are. I guess they could say they're being forced. I'm not super sure, to be honest.
Or you'd have to use.
Yeah, you're right.
you'd have to use probably 40% of the blocks on Ethereum are OFAC compliant. The only solution for that is if you have a complete decoupling of block proposers and block proposals, so they can't be associated with one another, and then the government can't come after you.
Interesting. And I think that's
I mean, because the same problem is there for layer twos as well, and like quite notoriously, right? Like a lot of layer twos aren't at stage one rugged friends at L2B, and I had this discussion with them recently because if you have a single sequencer, you don't get to say that 60% of the proposers are going to be rotating and then they can process it. And by the definition of like this sort of compliance criteria, is that you have to enable all forced transactions through. And the problem there is, I'd go to, a consensus US company, I'd go to the legal team and say, okay, well, does this fly? Absolutely not, right? Like if there's a transaction coming from the Lazarus group, right, and that goes through the sequencer that you're operating, like that's a serious crime. And I think like even some L2s are doing this today, and it's actually a little bit like, especially if you're in the US, like very, very sketchy. Probably not with this administration, but who knows in the future. So I think you have to have forced transactions like with OFAC compliant if you have any chance of like it tying back to an identity to remain compliant. I think this is why even L2s in their sort of evolved sense will still have to be decentralized. I don't think you actually end up with sequencer L2s purely for that legal and compliance reason.
Nice, very good. Guys, you got that? Everybody? zkEVMs, we good? Okay, huge round of applause for the panel. Exactly, you guys are really good. Thank you so much. I just have two super quick announcements before you guys run out of here. One is if you guys could all please just take 2 seconds, scan this QR code and do our survey. It takes literally 1 minute, but we're always striving to improve our events, whether it's the topics that we cover, the speakers that we have, or anything else that we're doing. So please, it really helps us out. It's literally like less than. Just do it. Just do it. Exactly. Thank you. 2 other things. 1, Solana birthday party is tonight. It's about a 3-minute walk around the corner. There's a bunch of us going. So if you guys want to come with us after Crypto Mondays, we'll all be heading over that way. Yeah. Last thing is if you guys could please take your rubbish with you when you leave the room. And the pizza is here. I'm sure you're all starving. So please help yourself. You've got the space for another hour. Thank you so much.
We're gonna go through. Call me. WhatsApp me if actually. Don't tell me. I don't think Telegram, not WhatsApp. Yes. Yeah.